What's up, gang? So today we're back for another case examination of a DBZ character. This time we're taking a look at Piccolo, and he's interesting because he's a mix of kind of a pretty balanced trait profile. We've been looking at these characters through the lens of the 5-factor model, or the ocean traits of within personality psychology. So that's looking at openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and the way these different dynamics and where you're at on the spectrum affect your personality, how you show up in the world, as well as your strengths and weaknesses. And I've been having a blast looking at this through the lens of DBZ. I've been nerding out, but bear with me, y'all, because I think Piccolo is an interesting one, because I think that balance is very reflective of the mentorship and the role of a wise guardian that we see him take as the series progresses, because that level of balance and understanding is something that you're definitely going to want out of somebody who's going to be your leader, kind of looking after the next generation. So Piccolo is one of Dragon Ball's most psychologically rich characters, period. He begins as the literal embodiment of evil, man, the Demon King Piccolo, but as time goes on, he transforms. We see him become a figure of wisdom, restraint, compassion, and a bridge to the future for the younger generation of Dragon Ball characters. And he demonstrates a really balanced kind of personality structure, and it's been forged through time, as well as a lot of solitude, mentorship, trauma, battle, moral growth. And I want to talk about him a little bit, man, because Piccolo's the GOAT. He's super interesting. So on the openness spectrum, that's looking at curiosity, creativity, that willingness to adapt to new perspectives, adventurousness, openness to ideas. Now, early on in the series, Piccolo starts off as a really rigid character. He was very low in openness, man. He was very dogmatic in his beliefs about how the world is and how people are, what his goals were, which was just the elimination of Goku. He was very ideological and just bound by the legacy of King Piccolo, his father, so to speak. And this worldview was very black and white. There wasn't a whole lot of nuance to it. Strength equal dominance, and that was the end of the story. Compassion was weak, but we see him grow, and I think about especially that growth that he experiences in relationship to Gohan. So his relationship with Gohan really transforms him. He learned to be empathetic. He learned to be flexible, and he saw the truth that strength can emerge from both cooperation and caring for another person as well. It doesn't have to come through just sheer dominance. And by the time the Android and Buu sagas roll around, he's one of the most cognitively flexible fighters that we have, man, when it comes to integrating new information, analyzing opponents strategically, adapting his tactics. He's able to take that emotional IQ that he has, that EQ, and transform that into his combat IQ, which makes him a really dangerous and opponent to have, as well as a very worthy ally. And later on, Piccolo integrates foreign perspectives into his training, man, with like the training that he does with Pan, like very later on, fusing with Kami and Nail, literally taking these other beings, their knowledge, their experiences, and their perspectives into account to grow himself. The way that understanding of Namekian culture and where he comes from begins to shift him and change him. He no longer just rejects what's unfamiliar or uncomfortable. He begins to learn from it. He allows himself to grow from those experiences, and as a result, he becomes very grounded in his principles, but he's wise enough to update them as experience demands. And this is a very powerful and balanced place to be psychologically, man. Piccolo's on point when it comes to this openness spectrum. So next we're looking at conscientiousness. So this involves a person's self-discipline, how reliable they are, how organized, their tendency towards structure, how internally driven that this person is towards mastery. And Piccolo, very high in conscientiousness. His mentality is completely structured around discipline. He trains like a monk, man. He's almost monastic in the way that he approaches his training. He's very meditative. He's very self-reflective. He has a very regimented lifestyle, man. His day-to-day is not frivolous. It's not spontaneous. He has this internal compass of what he feels like he needs to do for himself to grow, and he is diligent in working towards that. I'd say in a lot of ways he is the most dependable character in the series. When there's chaos, he's able to maintain a sense of composure. He has expectations for both himself as well as others. I think about Gohan, but it's not coming from a place of arrogance, but a belief in the importance of responsibility and recognizing it's not something that you can get away from, and that it's something that you need to embrace, and embrace it in a healthy way. But there are times where that conscientiousness can turn inward. He holds himself to like a sometimes nearly impossible standards, and he critiques himself a great deal and is really down on himself about his own inadequacies. And this tone can kind of mirror the way that he interacts with others. So both internally and externally, he can sometimes come across as judgmental, but it's not coming from a malicious place. It's because he holds himself to these high standards because he knows what's at stake, and he expects others to exhibit the same level of seriousness that he does. So this can make him sometimes come across as harsh but honest. And it's a bit different to the conscientiousness we see in Vegeta. It's not necessarily perfectionism with Piccolo. It's more of an integration with those wise qualities that we talked about. Because he's a bit more open, he has like this form of discipline that's like rooted in acceptance and understanding. Like there's a flexibility to his discipline in some ways. So he's structured, diligent. He has a vulnerability to abusive self-talk, but for the most part, it's self-regulating. You know, it helps him, push him, and drive him in the direction that he wants to go more so than it's destructive in a lot of cases. So again, I would say that he's high on the conscientiousness, but maybe not at the extremes where we're seeing that rigid perfectionism that can come from some other characters. So next up, we have extraversion. So looking at social energy, enthusiasm, reward orientation, goal orientation, that sensitivity towards positive affect and that kind of thing. And Piccolo is definitely on the introverted side, man. He is somebody that thrives in his solitude. He loves his alone time. He meditates alone. He trains alone, and he processes things internally. He's not a big talker when it comes to like what he's going through. And even when he celebrates in victory, you know, even when there's a victorious moment, he's the aura farmer, man. He's just sitting back. He's got the arms crossed, and he's very stoic even in the moments of joy. And he's pretty selective about connection, man. He's a person that avoids crowds, a Namekian that avoids crowds. He values intimate, meaningful connection and relationships with people. He doesn't need or want or desire the frivolous, offhand relationships, connections that some people might get a boost from or be okay with engaging with. His bonds with Gohan, Dende, and Pan, it kind of reflects his desire for like depth in relationships more so than a wide breadth of relationships. And he's just a utilitarian person. He's very functional. You know, this it's not coming from a place of avoidance, but it's purposeful. He just sees it as wasteful to do some of these other things. He's looking for clarity through that silence and kind of introverted introspection, man. It's not necessarily withdrawal out of fear or anxiety or anything like that. So for him, he gains his energy and battery through introspection rather than external stimulation, but he allows himself to be open enough to have these close interactions and relationships with other people. He's not completely closed off, but there is a tendency towards the much more introverted side for Piccolo. Now looking at agreeableness, so reflecting a person's empathy, altruistic qualities, tendency towards compassion, cooperation. Again, this is an area of change for Piccolo. So when you're talking Demon King Piccolo, that's the type of time that man was on. So he was very antagonistic, dismissive of other people, consumed by vengeance and hate. There was a huge lack of empathy that was because he was fragmented, you know, like he wasn't a holistic whole being at that point. He was born from hatred, and he goes through his transformational arc through that connection with Gohan, which really starts to shape and mold his personality into the character that we see Piccolo become. His personality changes. He becomes a lot more protective. He starts to value compassion. He starts to value and is capable of being self-sacrificial. He becomes a mentor archetype of a character, much more so than the tyrant that was focused on domination that he was at certain points throughout the series. And then by the time you get to Super, Piccolo is really the emotional anchor in a lot of ways. He's kind of holding the group together. He's taking care of the kids. He's calm. He's cooperative. He's super nurturing. Man's on baby duty all the time. And he has a lot of empathy for Gohan's potential, and that that desire to maintain Pan's safety and innocence and everything. It makes him really emotionally mature compared to a lot of our other characters who are solely focused on their like personal egoistic needs and that kind of thing. So my man has a full kind of moral and affect transformation on this agreeableness side, man. He becomes a far more agreeable character as the series goes on. And so finally, we're going to look at neuroticism, man, trait neuroticism. So this is measuring emotional reactivity, anxiety, that susceptibility towards a negative affect, depression, anxiety, those kind of things. It's when you're motivated by those fear or danger sensors in your brain more so than like the dopamine reward driven motivation and goal orientation that you see with extraversion. Probably mid to highly neurotic. He's somewhere in that spectrum because I won't say it's at its farthest extremes because he is on high alert. He's vigilant, he's analytical, he's cautious, and that stems from him being hyper vigilant of threats to the earth because of what his job and his role is now, more so than him being like emotionally volatile and like paranoid because he's not tempered well in the way that his personality is, man. His anxiety is kind of manifests as like preparedness. He wants to be ready for the things to come, and for him it serves a protective function. You know, he's at that heightened sensitivity to danger makes him perfect in that role of guardian. You want somebody that is a bit more highly sensitive to danger to be taking on the mantle of that role. You don't want somebody that's insensitive to risk. They are not going to be a good guardian. That's not where you want them at. It makes him an excellent strategist. He notices threats that other people overlook. He can pick up on a lot of subtleties, man. And this happens both tactically when they're in the middle of battle, or even emotionally when he can kind of see some of the people are struggling, especially with like Gohan and the ones that he cares for very deeply. But this can also lead towards a tendency towards pessimism, right? Where that vigilance and that mindset that he has can tilt into anticipating the worst possible outcomes, expecting failure, or perceiving danger before all the evidence is there sometimes, right? So this puts him in an interesting spot because he's still emotionally stable enough to lead, but he's vigilant and cautious enough to be able to protect as well, man. It's kind of an adaptive neuroticism more so than a maladaptive one. He is on alert, and you want that to be the case, especially when you're living in the world of Dragon Ball, but it doesn't lead him towards those tendencies towards paranoia like it does some other characters. And I think that this is what sets Piccolo apart. It's this balance that he has in so many areas. So Piccolo is definitely kind of that archetype of the wise guardian. He's a balance between discipline, compassion, calm, as well as vigilance. His character journey is one of integration. I talk about that in one of my previous videos. We're looking at that transformation from the Demon King into like the Piccolo that we now know, where he goes from this destructive kind of rigid mindset into someone that is very morally strong and sound. He finds wisdom in that solitude and that reflection that he allows himself to have, and he turns like that fear into awareness of looking out that at everything that's going on, because he's very serious and in his role. That's where that conscientiousness comes in. And unlike Vegeta, who's kind of in that battle with his ego, or Gohan, who is battling his inconsistency, Piccolo's struggle is one to try to maintain his balance, man. He wants to maintain control without losing connection or closing himself off too much, as is his tendency in some ways. So Piccolo's very secure, man. He's got this kind of like secure introversion that happens, and he's adaptive in both his neuroticism and his conscientiousness. He's someone who finds peace in the responsibility and the goals that he sets for himself, and he tries to achieve mastery and growth through that mindfulness and find strength in like the silence and service of others. So Piccolo, that's why he's the GOAT, man. That's why he's somebody that you want to have in your corner, and why he's become such a cornerstone for the later generations of like DBZ characters, man. He has the tools to be able to do so. It's that balance that allows him to be that kind of figure. So what do y'all think, man? Y'all agree with my look at the case profile? Do y'all see Piccolo and his traits in a different way? Talk to me. And if you got a moment, please check out the channel memberships, man. $5 a month, early access to videos, member exclusive content, and can help allow me to continue to do the things that I'm doing on this channel, man. Help promote the growth. So I appreciate you guys. As always, thanks for checking out this vid, and I'll see you again in the next one.